Welcome back, Beyond the Gates fans. Get ready, because today we're diving straight into a storm of emotions where no one is safe. Love, deception, and revenge collide in the dangerously tangled bond between Tomas, Eva, and Kat. Once again, the past resurfaces, demanding a price more devastating than anyone imagined. Eva returns not to love, but to destroy, to repay every wound Tomas once inflicted. And Tomas, the man who believed he could control everything, now finds himself spiraling into the very maze of secrets he created. Will he seek redemption or light the fuse for the next tragedy himself? Stay tuned as we uncover a story where love becomes a weapon, and every heart turns into a battlefield. Tomas stepped out of the room where the afternoon light washed the pale walls like a memory being slowly erased. He had not expected that meeting Eva could make the past burst open like that. A past he had tried to bury beneath the varnish of work, of relationships dressed up as duty and honor. But Eva, with a single glance, brought everything tumbling down. In the depths of his chest he knew he had never truly escaped her, just as he had never fully understood whom he had betrayed: Kat, the first love tied to a pristine tenderness, or himself, the man who never dared to face what was most genuine. On that day long ago, after a blazing argument with Kat, he went to Eva not out of love but to find a shelter. Yet love is never a place to hide, and in that moment of weakness he forged a crack no one could ever mend. Seeing Eva again, memories surged like an undertow, churning up what he thought had dissolved. Eva was no longer the gentle girl of former seasons but a woman sharpened by time, composed and commanding. In her eyes he no longer saw the softness he once knew but something cold and cutting, as if she were carrying a secret that could leave him with nothing. That feeling hurled him into the confusion of fear and desire, a relentless tug-of-war between reason and impulse. He understood that Eva had changed, and the change did not rise from love but from wounds he himself had sown. For Eva, the reunion was no accident. She had prepared for that moment, not merely to look at the man who had left her, but to reclaim a measure of justice she believed she was owed. During the years of silence she did not forget, did not forgive, she nurtured the hurt until it became a force. She had once loved Tomas with all the innocence she had, but now that love had become a weapon wrapped in poise and allure. She knew his pressure points, his pride, his vanity, his terror of losing control. That knowledge drew her back, not to rekindle anything but to prove that she could make him yield again, this time not with affection but with calculation. Meanwhile, Kat was the name no one dared to speak to Tomas, yet in every step he took, in every glance he cast at Eva, Kat's silhouette hovered like a curse. The fight years ago did not only cost him the woman he loved, it made him misplace his own center. Kat had left after discovering what existed between him and Eva, but what she left was not silence, it was a string of warnings he never forgot. He had once believed that Eva was only a brief misstep, a mistake he could keep hidden, but now, when everything has returned, he knows that this mistake set off a chain reaction threatening his career, his standing, and his grip on life. Eva's return carried not just the scent of feeling but the geometry of design. She appeared in the same professional orbit as Tomas, slid deftly into projects and meetings, and step by step eroded his composure in front of others. Tomas began to realize he was boxed into a game with rules he did not know, only that Eva was setting the pace. She made his self-confidence flicker, compelled his allies to ask uncomfortable questions, and stirred Kat, far away yet quietly watching, to sense a rising undertow. Tomas tried to keep a calm veneer, but a storm churned inside. Each time he looked at Eva he saw a figure who had once loved him to the point of self-erasure and who could now undo him with a single touch. He despised and desired her in the same breath, wanted to flee and to possess, to deny and to surrender. He asked himself whether Eva had truly returned for love, or whether everything was a reprisal disguised as emotion. This inner struggle slowly knocked his bearings loose, and when Kat reappeared, not the gentle version of the past but a steeled guardian of her dignity, Tomas knew matters were edging toward a point beyond repair. 3 people, 3 sorrows, 3 calculations were bound in a mesh of love, betrayal, and power. Eva wielded emotion like a scalpel, slicing into Tomas's memory layer by layer, while Kat quietly searched for a way to expose what had been veiled for years. Tomas felt the wall at his back, he did not know who stood with him or against him. Feeling for Eva flared like fire, but threaded through it was a vague dread that she might pull him under. He labored to control the field, yet the more he tried, the clearer it became that he was the one being controlled by the 2 women he could not forget. A question haunted him each night: did he truly love Eva, or only the sensation of salvation he felt in her presence? And did Eva love him, or was she simply enacting a revenge that used the very love once refused? From a distant shore, Kat prepared her final move, a step that could bring the structure down on all of them. The world around Tomas began to bend with quiet menace. Projects that once progressed cleanly now snagged on sudden complications. Long-standing partners stalled, citing doubts seeded by whispers. Reports bearing his name circulated with subtle errors, just enough to cast shadows he could not dispel with a single correction. Eva's signature appeared in places he had not expected, each instance a reminder that she had learned how to inhabit the corridors where power travels unseen. Kat, for her part, resurfaced in philanthropic boards and legal committees, where records can be requested and histories reassembled. The triangle of feelings had widened into a field of struggle with moving lines and invisible trenches. Tomas sensed how swiftly sentiment mutates into leverage. He had once told himself that the dispute with Kat was an accident of temperament, that his turn to Eva was a momentary lapse born of exhaustion and pride. But the present arrangement revealed a harsher truth: small betrayals do not remain small when left unattended, they compound in silence until they become a climate. In that climate, virtue and guilt trade places without warning. He stood at the center, a figure both accused and accusing, clinging to an identity that warred with the facts he had created. Eva orchestrated her steps with an elegance that troubled him. She did not raise her voice, she did not demand overt concessions. She inserted doubt into rooms where he had once been unassailable. A vacation photograph from years past appeared in a dossier, innocuous at a glance until one remembers who took it, and what weekend it memorialized. A calendar entry resurfaced with a location that contradicted his public itinerary. The artifacts were simple, but their sum was corrosive. Eva had learned the architecture of reputation, how a single delicate hinge, loosened, can unhang a door. Kat's return had none of Eva's performative sheen. It was the gravity of someone who has carried humiliation long enough to refine it into purpose. She opened old files, followed the faint lines where rumor had once traveled, and reconstituted timelines Tomas preferred to forget. In her privacy, she faced the ache of what might have been; in public, she allowed procedure to do the speaking that feeling could not. She did not seek drama, she sought a record. And records, once complete, are stubborn things. Compression pressed on Tomas from every direction. He had built his image on decisive judgment, yet now every decision forked into risk. Advance toward Eva and he might affirm what his detractors suspect; retreat and she would color the silence as guilt. Embrace conciliation with Kat and he could be read as capitulating to her narrative; ignore her efforts and he would validate the coldness that drove her away. He recognized that this was not merely a romantic crisis but a contest of frameworks, where each actor strives to fix the meaning of the past to govern the future. In his sleepless hours, Tomas replayed the afternoon light on those pale walls and asked whether integrity is a thing one possesses or a thing one rebuilds after breaking. If it can be rebuilt, at what cost, and for whose sake? Would any remedy satisfy the two women whose lives he had split along opposing edges? Or was the only honest step to dismantle the edifice of self-importance that kept leading him into the same alcove of errors? Yet even that act of contrition could be read as strategy, and strategy was exactly what the moment did not need and what he could not stop performing. Eva measured the distance between vengeance and deliverance without blinking. She had been the refuge of a man in flight; she refused to be his alibi again. But standing at the edge of her victory, she felt the tiredness of someone who has held a blade too long. What end would finally suffice? The public unmasking? The private capitulation? Or the recognition, which she would never request, that her worth never depended on his choice? The arithmetic of harm seldom balances the way the injured once imagined. A person can win every visible point and still find the interior ledger unchanged. Kat confronted a different abyss. The path she followed promised the vindication of documents and witnesses, yet each proof cut two ways: it corrected the story for the world and reopened the wound for her. She wondered if the truest settlement was not legal or social but something quieter. The permission to leave the narrative altogether. Could she exit without feeling as if she were conceding the stage to the two who had rewritten her life? Or had she earned the right to stand at the final reckoning and watch the scales find their weight? The city gleamed beneath Tomas one wind-scoured evening, as if each lit window were a verdict being written. He understood then that this was no longer about love. It was about power, about honor, about who would endure when the agreeable veneers were stripped off. Eva had returned to prove something, Kat waited to conclude something, and he, the figure pinned between, felt himself ground down by forces that had a common origin: love betrayed. When the light rose onto his face, there was no lingering glow of the man who loved, there was the calm chill of someone preparing to counterstrike. Would he choose atonement, or plunge into the spiral and break everything before it broke him? Would Eva continue her game until nothing remained to salvage, or would she become the captive of the emotions she thought she controlled? And Kat, did she really want justice, or only to watch the man who betrayed her buckle at last? No one could say. The only certainty was this: when three souls once bound by love, deception, and performance collide again, innocence is a currency no one retains. And somewhere at the edge of this triangle, a set of questions hovered like a thin, persistent fog. Which injury deserves redress first, and who has the authority to decide it? Can a triangle close without cutting one side away, or must every shape formed by betrayal lose a portion of itself to survive? If Tomas moves to repair what he shattered, does repair itself become an instrument of control? If Eva pauses at revenge's threshold, does the world read mercy as weakness or as the only brave refusal left? If Kat steps back from the brink, does she preserve her dignity or abandon her claim? The days lengthened and the light shifted, yet the field held. In boardrooms and hallways, in charity luncheons and midnight emails, their contest continued with the decorum of civility and the intensity of siege. Every courtesy masked an angle, every apology concealed a demand. The city, with its indifferent shine, bore witness as they circled the same set of unresolved truths: that attraction can be a trapdoor, that power can wear the fragrance of care, that silence can be louder than accusation. They pressed forward, each convinced of a different redemption, each fearing the same exposure, each one moved by the mingled engines of love, vanity, shame, and will. And so the three advanced toward whatever end their intertwined motives would allow, drawn by old promises and newer designs, by the ache to be seen and the dread of being known too well. Whether the next turn would deliver them to confession or to collapse, to a settlement or to a scar that never closes, none of them could know. But the lines had been laid, the dossiers organized, the memories sharpened to points. In the quiet intervals between moves, a hard lesson took shape in the air around them: it is possible to win the argument and lose the self, to reclaim the narrative and forfeit the peace, to prove a point and still be haunted by the blank it cannot fill. And as Tomas looked down at the grid of streets, he felt the truth that frightened him most: that sometimes the only way out of a maze built from pride and longing is to admit you built it, and to be prepared for what must be dismantled when you finally start drawing a line back to the beginning. As the last lights in the room went dark, only Tomas remained standing alone in the shadows, his eyes reflecting 1,000 unanswered questions. The storm between him, Eva, and Kat had not subsided, it had merely shifted into a more terrifying silence, one in which anything could explode again at any moment. Eva had gone, leaving behind a trail both tender and merciless, while Kat quietly prepared her final move. In that suffocating air, Tomas began to realize this battle was not only among three people, but between faith and guilt, between love and power. He might win a single skirmish, but could he ever escape himself? Outside, the city still shone, but within every soul that light had been replaced by the smoldering embers of hurt and hatred. Eva looked up at the sky, where the stars glittered as if to remind her that freedom is never gained without a price. Kat, in her silence, felt her heart grow cold and stronger than ever. She was no longer the woman who had been wounded, but the one holding the final move. And Tomas, in the thick of a pitch-black night, understood that none of them truly triumphed, because the war had long exceeded the limits of love. When the night drew to a close, the question still hung in the air: who would step forward, and who would fall? Was this the beginning of redemption, or the last chapter of an irreversible tragedy? The answer lay ahead, where feelings had not yet burned out and secrets still waited to be revealed.